Hello. Welcome to another episode of the Funky Marketing Podcast. This is the third one when we record people who we actually pronounce as Funky Marketing top voices. Those are like the people that we consider as people who are speaking their minds out, don't go for some bullshit tactics, bullshit strategies, don't talk what other people like to hear, but have their own voice and trying to change the industry at least a little bit. Today, my guest is Francisco, and I would like to give him the opportunity to kind of tell us a little bit about himself.
I must admit, I hate talking about myself. I love talking about stuff. I don't love talking about myself, but fair enough. So I'm a keynote speaker on storytelling. So my focus is storytelling. So that I usually do that through either keynotes or training or coaching consultancy. And most of what I do today, and either through any of these means or through social media, is to try to make people more aware of how the way they communicate is, I could say, rubbish, but that wouldn't be polite. It's just not effective. It's a lot less fun than it should be. It's a lot less effective, and some people, when they're trying to sound a bit high principled, say it's just not human enough. And I think story is the answer to most of those things. So just understanding how to use story in your communication. This could be anything. Some people obviously will use this for marketing, but it can be for leadership. It can be for employee engagement. It can be for sales. It can just be for trying to get your ideas across through whatever means you're using in a more interesting and memorable way.
Totally agree. Stories are something that we need to say a lot. Like, I was just thinking about it the other day, talking about marketing with some students on the Faculty of Economics, and they asked me a few questions about Seth Godin, about the things that he's saying, specifically about the book, like all marketers are liars, and how like it's like your customers are the bigger liars than the marketers will ever be, like, because they don't know what they want, but they just think that they want something, and then when they don't get it, because like usually the answer can be something that doesn't exist yet, and like if they don't get it, they get pissed off, and it's kind of interesting. I've seen that a lot of times, and that's why the copywriter's job is very hard thing to do, especially like doing the research, getting into the minds of those people, and kind of like that's why marketing is not black and white, but it's like totally gray.
So just today, I put something out on social media about this experiment from Wharton Business School. And it's one that's been replicated plenty of times, but it's a very basic thing. So you ask people, who would you give more money to? So, option A is Rokia, who is this 7-year-old girl who lives in Africa. And her family is very poor. She is often starving. So whatever money you give her will help feed her, educate her, and improve her overall quality of life. Option B is you're highlighting that because of not enough rainfall and grain shortages, there are about 3 million people currently starving in the same country Roki is from, which is Mali. And if any money you give is going to help these people not starve. And unsurprisingly, almost everybody says, hey, I care about the little girl more than I care about these 3 million people, which is understandable. We've evolved to care about individuals and our own tribe and not all these random people. But when you add them, you say, okay, so there's this little girl who's starving, and she's just one out of 3 million people starving in her country because of this. People give less money than if they just gave it to her. And when you tell them, listen, do you realize that this is happening, right? You're valuing the one more than the few. Even if I said, even if the story, now you're still helping her if you give money, but now you're helping more people. They will lower their donations to the individual level to match the ones they would have done in the group level, because they realized there was a problem. But the problem, once they realize that, it makes them less charitable. So I agree, people they don't necessarily know what they want, and if they think rationally what makes more sense, they might come to very different conclusions than what their final choices are going to be. So I don't think necessarily anyone is lying. I mean, plenty of people are lying, but I don't think it's necessarily a case of lying. It's a case of understanding how we work. And if you understand how we work, then you can pull on the right heartstrings, hopefully for a good cause, and not, to sell some random crap that nobody needs and makes their lives on the planet worse. But it's part of the human condition, I guess.
Exactly. Like when it was like 2 years ago, I think, when I just came to the previous agency when I worked at, like, we needed to do a marketing for this clinical institution when they wanted to target women who are yet to be pregnant. So because they want them when they are pregnant, when they are in that stage, they can go to them. So they need to be informed about everything. And like the team that is doing the research and everything is like reading all over like female portals and everything. They're like, oh man, now I know how the female brain is working. Now we can do something with it. And it's kind of interesting. Like, you play the certain role and you get into not only like into their minds and emotion, but you also get the compassion to do it, how they are acting, how they are doing stuff. So talking about stories and all those kind of things, like, tell me a little bit how your story started. How was your childhood? Where did you grow up, actually? I have no idea.
So I was born in the US. My father was taking a PhD in Philadelphia. So I was born there. I was there for only a couple of years, and then my family moved back to Brazil. My parents, and my little brother. And so my parents divorced right after. So essentially I was raised by my mom, and I saw my father every couple of weeks. And I grew up in Brazil. And every time we talk about someone's childhood, there's that instinct to say my childhood was normal. And I think to most people's understanding of what a childhood looks like, mine was normal, was uneventful. I had, apart from the divorce parents, which is a pretty common thing nowadays, more than perhaps it used to be. But, I went to school, I had friends, I played around, I played football, just did the usual stuff, I think, that most middle-class kids do. But it's also true that when you talk about childhood, the things that we don't necessarily remember that well unless we try is how we used to feel. Because I think, this is probably even more normal than the rest, is I felt pretty happy for most of my childhood, but at times I didn't. And, I can clearly remember plenty of times feeling inadequate and feeling like, I didn't have friends I always had, but like, especially when you start get interested in the opposite sex or any sex, it's easy to feel that, you're not getting anywhere, you're not popular, which I wasn't. I was always nerdy at the time. You're wearing a Captain America shield t-shirt. Like, that's the sort of stuff I would love to do when I grew up, but then you got butchered in school. So it wasn't easy being that kid back then. So but again, it tailored a lot of my sensibilities for now. Humor is a very good defense mechanism that a lot of people developed, and I certainly did. And other than humor, it was speaking. So whenever there was group activities in class, there was, you went to someone's house and then you're trying to get something done, and then the person's mom is bringing you snacks, and only like 2 people are working, everyone else is just mucking about, and you always had to choose someone who's going to get up in front of the class and present, usually, and I was that kid. So between the humor, that and helping people get through their English and literature tests, I was just popular enough to get by high school without any major psychological damage, I guess.
Yeah, sounds like so many people that I know. Like, but it's kind of interesting, like that we consider some things normal. Maybe not in Brazil, but here, like in Serbia, growing up, like we couldn't go out of the country in the 90s, so the only where we can travel was like going with a basketball team around Serbia at the time, and also like in 2000 we actually 99 2000, yeah, we were bombed, and it's kind of, I remember this as probably the happiest period of my time. Like I just because I could play like basketball the whole day with my friends and hang out and like talk about all those kind of things. Like sometimes we went to the shelter and there were like all kind of people that know a lot of different things, and I could pick their brains and just talk about all kind of different things. And for me, it was interesting. But when you look at uh, like the military object in the city was bombed for like 3 times, and it's like totally different thing, and the different thing is how we see those things at the time. And like I don't know, when I go back and think about it, like it's one of the biggest things that happened to our country, the bad things. But for me, like, and my friends, we were kind of like happy. I didn't have the exam to enter the high school because of that. Like, woohoo, let's go.
Yeah, no, I wanna talk about that. But talking about bombing, you seem to be getting bombed by notifications there. You wanna shut down. Yeah, but so the stuff that is weird that we don't think is weird is true. Obviously, your weird is much weirder than mine, because the one thing that came to mind now that a lot of people would be very strange is how when I grew up, there was even more of a difference between people who had money and people who had no money in Brazil. So one thing that I grew up with is this idea that everybody had a maid. Now, I didn't have a live-in maid, but most of my friends did. So there's this person who would live, sometimes helped raise them, and would live in their house from Monday to sometimes Saturday. And most apartments when I grew up always had like a little bathroom and maybe a little bedroom off the kitchen, and people just live there. And that was the most normal thing in the world. And Brazil to this day, if you look at like the way school works, you either go in the morning or in the afternoon. You don't do like the whole day. Like here in Spain, my kid goes to school, she gets in at 9 and she leaves at about 4:30 or 5. And in Brazil, no, you went in at 7:30 and you were done by 12. So unless one of your parents didn't work, you needed a grandmother or a maid or a babysitter to look after you for the rest of the day. And that was very normal. But obviously, for most people, the idea of a live-in maid makes it sound like you're in Downton Abbey or something, which is definitely wasn't the case for us. And on what you were talking about, the bombing thing, and I don't know if this had something to do with it or it was just, childhood and you didn't think about the stuff much. There's this super interesting book by Sebastian Junger called Tribe, and he talks about the bombing in London and how by most measures, people's quality of life was considered higher during the bombing. Because you stop caring about all the small things that don't really matter, because there's a sense of community, because you're all together fighting something, and people got a sense of purpose. So when the bombing started in London, people thought there's a lot of concern about mental health, the same way we hear now about COVID, but perhaps now we don't have that sense of purpose. We don't feel like we're all together fighting something. Perhaps we should. But in the bombing, that was definitely the case. You had a clear enemy. So instead of people breaking down and the mental institutions being overrun, it was the opposite. People were feeling better from the stuff and thinking, can you let me out? Because I want to contribute to the efforts. So there is this weird thing that happens, well, perhaps not so weird, but there's this thing that happens to human beings when we are under like group stress, that we band together and we help each other, and we feel purposeful, and that is a powerful force for our psychological and emotional well-being. Now, we probably should find ways to do that without being bombed, but at least it's a clue on what works.
Like, listen, let's have some fun. So at the time, like, my father was recruited to the army, and it was like my mother, my sister, and me, and it was the NBA playoff. Like San Antonio and New York were playing. Latrell Spliver was giving it all up, and I was spending long nights alone, like watching this, and it was DSF, like the German channel, when like in the breaks they would have I don't know, this like you call it sex call centers, like try, no, and like I needed to put the mute as soon as the break hits. If I don't do it, or if like my mother and sister wake up and like, are you really watching the game? This is like kind of the most hilarious thing. I needed to be concentrated the whole time, just to mute or unmute things.
So in Brazil we had what was it called? Sexy time or something like that. And it was, I think, Saturday nights, and it would start around 11 o'clock at night. So every teenager in Brazil would try and, oh yeah, I'm not sleepy, I'll hang around a bit longer, and then you watch this thing. And I did it worse than that. When I lived with my father for a bit when I was, I don't know, 16, 17, and there was cable TV, so you could hire the porn channels if you wanted. And he was traveling a lot at the time. So one day I called the cable company and I pretended to be him, and I allowed the channel in. I think it was free at the time, just had to allow it. And I watched a ton of that thing. And then my father only found out because I had two small brothers who didn't live with him either. And one day he got home really angry because he was taping something for the kids, either some movie or some cartoon, and halfway through the cartoon, there was like, clearly someone had changed the channel to some porn and changed back. Luckily, I was just channel hopping and didn't actually sit down to watch anything, because otherwise I would have scarred the poor kids forever. But yeah, he wasn't happy with that. I didn't live with him for much longer after that happened.
that was the end. So tell me, how did your career actually started? You told me an interesting thing. Like you started working in a government.
Yeah, so I needed a job because I needed money, and this is very strange. So my mom was working in a different branch of the government at the time, and she said, "Oh, let me ask around and see if there's any jobs going." And there was this job in the local government in the south of Brazil, and they said, "Oh, we need your help to fix the website or redo the website." And I'm like, I have no idea what to do. Right. And I don't know why they hired me, really. I don't know if someone owed my mom a favor or whatever. I mean, this is Brazil, so it's possible. And I came in, and then they realized I had no idea what I was doing. So someone came in and taught me HTML coding, which it was all right. I learned, and I could do it reasonably well. But I mean, there was no way I was going to redo a whole website of government branch with my basic HTML knowledge. So very soon they moved me to data entry. Oh, and there was this thing, for some reason, there was like a director's room of office available when I started working. So that's where I was. And I just slept most of the time. I closed the door and slept in the sofa for most of the time. And then they moved me to data entry, which was boring as anything. And I got so bored that I started browsing through the web. And one of the things I used to like at the time was watching Buffy the Vampire Slayer, one of the most underappreciated TV shows of all time. And so I was just reading the synopsis of the episodes and people commenting on, oh, this is a really good one because Spike did whatever. And so I did that for 2-3 months, but I was so bored that I started clocking in, I think, half an hour earlier. And then I would go into the bathroom, close the door, and take a nap. And because this was the summer, I was kind of annoyed that my mates were all outside on the beach getting tanned and I was working. So, put on some stupid self-tanning lotion and then lock myself in the bathroom. So, it looked like I wasn't sitting in an office all day. So yeah, not the greatest of jobs. And I quit that one, I think, after 2 or 3 months.
Yeah, I mean, it's okay for a starting job. Yeah, just to see what are the things that you don't want to do, in a way.
Yeah, true.
So when you look at that time and the time afterwards, like, were those the biggest challenges that you faced, like when you started, when you realized like what you want to do, those kind of things, or those are some other things, maybe things that you are facing right now when it's like COVID and things are changing and all those kind of things?
In the beginning, I don't think there was much in the way of challenge. So, that job was just boring. Then I was an English teacher for a while. Then I came to Europe, which a lot of people would consider the challenge. But I don't know, things just tended to work out reasonably well. I was doing a lot of bar work and things of that nature. And then some friends said, "Oh, by the way, I think you would be good at telemarketing." I'm like, okay. And I was reasonably good at that, and then that's what I sort of started in the whole sales industry, because I was on the phone, then I was managing a team, then I was an operations manager, an accounts manager, and then eventually I left London, which is where I was living, to come to Europe, to Spain, and work in the sort of finance sector. And those things were fine. The biggest challenge, I think, before now was just that for a long time, as I got into financial sales, and I was pretty good at it for a while, but I had a big team. And although I was good and I was hitting my numbers, my team wasn't. And the company I worked for was very sales driven, and they really believed in pressure. And in the beginning, it was fun, but then it just started breaking me. We had to report figures every Friday. So I would send the email with the figures, shut down my computer, turn off my phone, and not turn it back on until Saturday, because I knew my boss wouldn't call me on Saturday. But I didn't want to get a call at 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock on a Friday going, "Oh, what the hell are these numbers?" And that just happened for a long time. And at some point, I started hitting the alcohol, and I went from drinking maybe a glass of wine a night, which I probably still do, to drinking most of a bottle a night. And it started genuinely affecting me. And it still took me, I think, 2 or 3 years to realize, listen, this is not healthy. I need to do something about it, and then quit. And now what happened was, what I was doing was fine. It was just a bit boring. I wasn't excited about work. But I've been talking for ages. I've been speaking as a hobby for a long time, and telling stories and all of that. And people kept asking me, "Why don't you just do this professionally? You're putting all the time. I might as well just get paid for it." And it was never something I thought about doing seriously. But then I decided to do it, and I decided to do it this year. So I started getting my ducks in a row, and I got the website sorted. I started getting the podcast done. And by the time I was ready to say, okay, now I can start really telling people this is what I'm doing and starting to get the work in, it was maybe the month that we went into lockdown. So it's not been easy, because you spend a while with sort of a plan, and then you get punched in the face. And it takes some time to say, okay, all of the stuff that I was thinking that I wanted to do is not going to work for maybe another year. So do I wait? Do I try something different? Do I just adjust? And that's what I've been going through now. And it's difficult, but compared to the previous experience I had with the job, that was with the pressure and all of that, that was bad difficult. This is mostly good difficult. It's challenge on top of challenge, and it gets frustrating at times because you have to keep learning new things. But I've learned a ton of things this year that perhaps I wouldn't have learned had this been more of a normal year. So it's a challenge, but it's the type of challenge that I'm happy to take. Not every year, but but every now and then, I think it's the way to level up.
Yeah, totally agree. This year was like kind of challenging, but I feel the same way. Like I learned a lot, and like I learned that I can trust myself with so many things, with so many ideas that I have, and all those kind of things. And like I just need to go over there like and show to the world the things that I know, and also kind of like it was time to build my own team and start doing those things. But like pandemic and everything else, I thought that it would change some of the things when it comes to marketing and sales, like maybe eliminate the companies going after meaningless MQLs, but it didn't happen. I don't think it's gonna happen soon. But anyway, what are some things that you are seeing that are like considered the bad practice in marketing and sales overall?
Well, I mean, there's been a lot of bullshit with both the pandemic and with Black Lives Matter, with a whole bunch of companies just trying to jump on a bandwagon. And I think it's great to support the causes you believe in, but sometimes you can just see that it's in Portuguese you'd say it's from the mouth out, right? So you feel that doing blackout, on Black Friday on Instagram is supporting, anti-racism, and so you do it, or you put in the little hashtag BLM on at the end of your post or whatever. That doesn't make any difference. And a lot of companies have just said stuff, but then you go in and look at their employment practices and you look at the stuff they've been doing when it wasn't considered fashionable to do it, and they don't really believe this stuff. They're just saying it because it's the thing to say now. So that's one thing. The other stuff that I don't love is, I think so a lot of people just gotten too carried away with the moment we're living in, and they're either trying to be the best people in the world or the best companies in the world and look like everything they do is a social cause when we know for sure that it's not, or they're just trying to keep finding the positive of it. I mean, life is still normal in many ways for a lot of people. And I think companies, it's okay to just talk to your customers the way you need to talk to your customers about the problems they have that have nothing to do with pandemics or lockdowns or anything else. So if you're Patagonia and it's a big thing of your marketing to be socially responsible, fine, by all means do. But if it's not, and you want to find ways to support, then there are some good ways. And just today I saw something about, like, Burger King has had some pretty cool initiatives, and they did one just now where they are talking about other food from other restaurants, like smaller restaurants. And it says, that there's the Whopper, but there's also the tacos from this place, and there's the, whatever from this other place. And, we think it's okay for us to stop posting pictures of burgers on our Instagram for a while and give these people a bigger reach so they can promote some of their stuff. Now that's cool. Right? I think that's a cool initiative, right? This is not them saying we fully stand behind the families affected by it. It's just like, fine, you're gonna do it. Don't brag about it. Just do it. People realize it's cool and you'll get the karma points for it. But if it's not your thing, if it feels artificial, don't do it. Then just post pictures of your burgers. Right? People are still eating burgers. It's fine.
Yeah, it's happening. It's happening a lot. I was having a conversation with Pep Laya the other day about like the messaging, differentiation, and those kind of things. And it really can be seen that a lot of companies are trying to force themselves into that, to force themselves to talk about things that are around them and things just so they can get some few points that they can get like the public to talk about them. But instead, what should happen is that the companies should actually know what their values are, what the culture is, and based on that, like there are specific topics that they want to be allowed about, not about everything, not every day the other topic, not like how it goes, like, okay, now we have certain things happening in US, like Black Lives Matter, we're going to be loud about that. Then another thing is happening, we're going to be loud about that too. No, just choose what are some things that are important for you as a company and for your customers, possibly, and then just go into that, because you cannot change the world just by talking about different stuff every day, but you can change at least a little bit if you focus on specific things that are aligned with your values.
Yeah, and it's the easiest thing in the world to show that either you are serious about the stuff or you're not. And this is another place where stories come in handy, because if you've cared about stuff for a while, then there's plenty of stories you should be able to share from your employees, from your customers, that shows that you care. If you started caring and you're genuinely doing something useful, then that's your marketing now. Like, it's just you doing that thing, and you hardly need any product it's a tiny bit of product placement for a TV commercial of the thing you've done that is actually good for the world or for this cause. Or you'll be doing cool things for your customers, and they will share those stories. Now, on the other hand, it's very easy for you to be saying a whole bunch of stuff, and for one employee to say, yeah, that's bullshit, because you're talking about Black Lives Matter or whatever you're talking about, and I am this person, and this is what I've lived through as one of your employees in the last 6 months. So I think you get caught out very easily, and even if you're not caught out, you might just come across fake, and that's not. I think we have very little tolerance for that stuff now. So if you don't genuinely mean it, then don't, because I think you have more to lose than to gain by trying to tick these social boxes. People see through that stuff now more than ever.
One thing that you said right in the interview is that they're all kind of people that are considering themselves as experts now or thought leaders. And what I see, and the thing that I'm trying to teach also the companies, very like professionals from those companies, is that when somebody comes, let's say, to your LinkedIn page profile, they need to see kind of the story. How did you become that person? Where did you get the knowledge? Where did you get the experience? And people don't think about that enough. Like, I want to see the journey, because the journey is what gives you relevancy and authority and everything. And like, I don't see many people doing that. They're just like, I'm just going to come up to LinkedIn. I'm going to open my profile and I'm going to say I'm the expert, and I don't know, like storytelling, just because it's popular today. And I can say it, like, who can prove that I'm not that kind of person?
Some things are very easy to prove, and some things not so much. Now, so there's I think there's two levels of proof that you can offer. And for me right now, one of them is easy, the other one is getting easier. So the easiest way for you to prove that you are a relevant voice in whatever industry you're in, or that you are any type of expert, although I don't think you need to call yourself one, is just do the thing that you say you're helping people with or teaching them. So storytelling, for example, is a pretty easy one. Now, there's a lot of people that use storyteller in their, say, LinkedIn name tag, right? So they're storytellers, or they're brand storytellers, or whatever, right? But at least in their social media, they cannot tell a story to save their lives. Most of them don't even know what a story is. Like, there's a lot of people that love starting their posts with story time, and then they just tell you a whole bunch of stuff that is not a story. So if someone is saying that they can teach people how to tell stories, they need to be able to tell stories, right? And this is pretty basic. If someone is telling you that they're going to teach you how to make your LinkedIn more effective, well, their LinkedIn needs to be effective. Now, that doesn't mean they need to have 200,000 followers, right? But they need to be getting engagement in their posts. And again, engagement is not the only criteria, but they need to be able to prove to you that this thing that they're saying they're good at, they are good at. So that's the first level of proof you can offer. The second one is just results, right? And this is something it takes working to do it. And then you can have case studies, you can have testimonials, you can have, just share examples of the stuff you've done for clients. Those two things are significantly more important than putting the word expert or thought leader or whatever in your website or in your marketing. It just prove what you've done. For speakers, is the way most speakers will do this is, you have a video so people can see you speak and know that you can do it. You have a list of clients that is reasonably impressive. You have testimonials, and it's not going to be very different for a lot of other people. Like, if you're in a marketing agency, who do you work with? right? I don't know if awards are particularly relevant in that industry, but if they are, have you ever won any awards? Because otherwise it's just a lot of hot air. And I think more than anything else, I think it's kind of sad, right? Because if you have to keep calling yourself stuff, it's a self-esteem thing, right? So occasionally I meet people, like doing the work I do. Sometimes I'm emceeing an event, right? And you get all these people that are doctors, like they're officially doctors, and they make a point of being introduced as doctor something something. And I get that in some environments it's important for your credibility that you are a doctor, but sometimes it's not. No one cares that you're a doctor, but they get upset if they're not called doctor something. I was like, really? Is that really important to you? I mean, being the doctor is not enough for self-esteem. So I don't know. I find that, like, if you look at mine, I'm talking about the things I do more than the things I am. I don't even call myself a storyteller, although it'd be ridiculous to presume I'm not. But I don't know. It's, to me, just sounds a bit pretentious. I can tell I'm telling stories all day. Like, if you just look at my posts, that 2 or 3 out of 5 will be a story of some kind. So, it's there. Stop saying you are something, and just, don't tell, show.
It's kind of interesting how LinkedIn works. Like, I never saw any of your posts until like Martin told us, like, there is a guy who is doing really good stuff, following him. Like, how we come up with the Funky Marketing Top Voices list. Like, all the people from Funky Marketing, we all had a list of like 10 names. Then we compared them, and then we narrow it down. So there was some people that I have never seen in my feed before. And that's kind of how, okay, so we learned that there are also different people doing really good stuff, and it's kind of help us discover people like you in my case. And like, so talking about that, what I ask every guest now within Funky Marketing Top Voices, like, what would you consider as funky marketing? When somebody tells you, like, define funky marketing, how would you do it?
So I'm obviously biased towards the whole story stuff, right? And I think on the interview I mentioned the term inspirational marketing, which I've stolen from a guy who I had in my podcast a few weeks ago called Mark Ensign, who has the book with the best title ever. It's called Be a Dick. And Mark, he describes inspirational marketing as essentially companies doing, going over and above for clients, and then just sharing those stories or doing it in public, right? So he shared the story which I loved, which was he was getting an airplane, he was flying somewhere, and I forgot what the company was, Jet Air or whatever, and the plane was late. So he tweeted something like, is it a bad sign that it's 5 minutes away from my plane taking off and the airplane is still not here? And they replied to him and said, oh, listen, we're really sorry, there was a delay. What can we do for you? And he said, can I pilot the plane? And it's like, well, no, we can't. But can we offer you something else? Yeah, how about unlimited snacks? And they said, sure, deal. When you get on the plane, there'll be unlimited snacks for you, right? So they did this on Twitter, right? So that got a lot of traction. And then he was flying with them again a few months later, and he said, oh, I'm about to get on my whatever JetBlue flight. Any chance of more unlimited snacks? And they replied immediately saying, we'd already seen you were on the plane, and that had already been booked for you. Enjoy. Now, that type of stuff, which again takes them nothing, right? It's a tiny bit of money. It's just having someone there guided to say, do some cool stuff for your customers. Like, they need anything, go over and above. And if you can make it funny, then even better. And I think that to me is very funky marketing, right? And if you're genuinely doing cool stuff, particularly if it's funny stuff, that's all the marketing you ever need. And again, all they're doing is then you have that story told, either by you, or in this case, Mark has told the story a million times. I've now told the story a few times. And that type of organic marketing, I think if you can stimulate that by amazing customer service, that is something that will resonate with people a lot more than a cool ad will. Like a cool ad that is clearly fiction can still be immensely productive. But I mean, who watches ads these days? Like I don't remember the last ad I watched, because I don't watch them on YouTube. I just skip them. I don't watch TV really. So I think you need this stuff, because the usual barriers are, the usual ways to market are not as clear as they used to be. And if you can do something that other people, if you can create stories that other people tell for you, then, I mean, obviously I can't remember the name of the airline, which that's not reinforcing my case, but it's just because it's an American airline and I don't know American airline names. But generally, you remember this stuff a lot more, and it's just cool, right? My association, if I'll see the name, I'll remember. I was like, these are the guys with the unlimited snacks, right? And I'll have more sympathy for them immediately. So that to me would be a pretty good example of anti-marketing.
Amazing examples. I love to hear and read about those kind of stuff. I remember when I just started in marketing, like I didn't know actually what was marketing when I was studying also marketing. So for me, when I started to study marketing, it was all like advertising. So I look all kind of examples, but those were mostly examples from advertising. And like when you go deeper, and especially on Twitter, when there's conversation with the customers is really taking place. And when you go, if you are angry on someone and you want to let it all out, you go on Twitter, and you can see all kind of companies and the way they handle those relationships. And you can easily spot who's good at it, who's bad, who's like improving even. And there are so many small examples that you can just take out and show as really good or really bad practice. Mm-hmm. One thing I'm interested in, like having all that in mind in your background, different kind of things that you are doing at the moment and that you have been doing before, like when you look at 2021, what are some things that you think you're going to take from this year and just double down? Or what are some things that you are thinking, these are the things that I will finally have time to do or be able to do it if the pandemic allows?
I'll start with the last one because that's the easiest one. The thing I'm really looking forward to do is getting on a stage again, because this is something I really love doing. And as much as I've adjusted to telling stories in front of a computer, my part of it is okay. So what I'm putting out is okay. Sometimes it's a lot easier, but what I'm getting back is very different. I mean, there's just no comparison in telling a story or giving a speech in front of 100 people, 200 people, particularly if you're trying to do anything funny, and that tends to be what I go for often, because you get all that energy back, you get instant feedback, and this is very difficult with the computer. So humor is terrible on the computer because you just no idea if you're bombing or not. I mean, you can get a feel, but it's not the same. And also, I will learn a lot. How can I put this? Doing stuff online makes me better in many ways, but it would take me years to learn something that I would learn in days or weeks by doing it live. Like I can get material that I think is good enough and do it live and know exactly what works and what doesn't and change it immediately. Online, yeah, I mean, if you get people that you trust to give you proper feedback, maybe, but I can't judge it myself. It's very difficult to figure out myself. So that I'm really missing the stage, and that's what I hope we can get back to, at least to some degree, next year. What I'll take out from this year, there's probably too many things to count, because I didn't have a podcast, I didn't have any social media, I didn't hadn't done a lot of the stuff that I've done this year now, like event moderation. I hadn't really done that. There's some types of training that I hadn't really done. So all the technical stuff, like, you can see a boom arm here, and I have a green screen. I had no idea about any of this stuff about 8 months ago. So all of that is useful. But I think to me, the main thing that I'll take out forever, I hope, is as soon as I started doing something that I cared more about, as soon as I started turning what was a passion and a hobby into what I focus a lot of my time and energy on, it just changed completely what work means. Because, I was writing a book, and I did that in the midst of having 2 small kids and doing it at night because I had other stuff to do, and that was fine. I didn't mind getting 6 hours sleep instead of 8 because I was writing a book. Now I still edit all my episodes on the podcast, and I do all the research for the guests. I don't mind any of that. I enjoy doing all of that. So like if my kids are going to be at home now for 3 weeks because of the holidays, so I'm screwed. But if my kids weren't around for a few weeks, I wouldn't think, great, now I can go party. I would think, great, because there's all this work I want to get done, that I want to get done, and that I enjoy getting done, and now I have all the time to do it. And that's not something I had felt for many years, and you forget about it. And that fire, lit under your ass, it's the difference between realizing your week has 7 days and not 5 horrible days, and 2 that you genuinely enjoy yourself. And I hope never to forget that. And I hope that if this job, or at least the way I'm doing the job, starts feeling the way that it used to feel back then, that I'll realize quick and change, because it's just a different experience of life. There's just no comparison. And every time someone talks to me about how tired they are from work or how miserable they are, I tend to think now that I don't know if they can change the way I have changed this year, but I really hope they do, because it just changes their experience of life in such a meaningful way that it's difficult to put into words.
I can actually feel the energy while you were talking about it. Those are the things that I love to do. We have more time to do it. I would do it. I feel like my wife is feeling that way while she's listening to me, and she's not very happy that when I add also MBA in the night to all this stuff. But it reminded me of yesterday. I was also thinking about those things, about what's coming, and about just an opportunity to work more on some things that I can now. I couldn't do it before, and going back from the office, I'm usually on my bike, and the song started, Bruce Springsteen, I'm on fire. The song is talking about totally different things, but for me it meant I'm on the right way, and there's the fire has started, and we're just going this way, and it's something that it makes me really excited. And kind of those little moments when you realize that you are on the right track, and you just need to put in additional work if you can find time. I don't have kids, so I think I probably have more time than the people with kids right now, but love those kind of things. And
the time one is a very important point.
Mm-hmm.
because most people say, oh, I don't have the time, but not trying to be controversial, but I think that's bullshit. Because I know I currently have 2 jobs that I do, right? So I still have some of the finance stuff going on the side. I have all this speaker stuff, which is not one thing. There's the podcast that comes out every week. There is the social media stuff. There is the separate marketing I do. There is preparing material for it. There is the actual doing of the job that sometimes takes hours and hours. I have this award thing that, the award goes to thing that I mentioned to you. I spent 3 hours rehearsing that. Now today I have to check the pronunciation of another, 50 awards or 50 winners. And then I'm going to spend 4 or 5 hours doing the thing. Okay, so I don't have a great deal of time, and I have one of my kids is 4, and the other one is not even 1 year old yet, and I actually help. No, it's not. My wife doesn't do everything, but I don't watch TV, and because I'm working from home now, I'm not spending time commuting. And my wife nagged me about some of this stuff the other day, and I said, listen, nothing that I'm doing is leisure. That is not the way people understand. I'm not. every podcast I'm listening to feeds my brain in a particular way that and it's not all about work, but it feeds my brain in a particular way that is useful for work. The stuff, if I'm reading books, and I read a lot of stories, but I also read nonfiction books that will help me do my job better. So very little of my time is spent, I'm just chilling, watching Netflix and just for fun. So I think time is an excuse a lot of people love, and it is true in some cases, but take all the time you're spending on social media and all the time you're spending watching TV shows or whatever, playing video games, and that is probably 2 or 3 hours a day for most people, right? Particularly if you just count every 3 minutes that you go check your phone, reply to a few posts, like some stuff, and then go off. That we can easily find 2 hours a day if you try a bit. Even if you commute a lot, and if you commute a lot, listen to stuff, read while you're commuting if you're not driving. And then you find the time, right? And, you can find an hour or two every day if it's really important to you to find that time. And so, I think it can often become an excuse that is not, I think it's just that, an excuse.
I totally agree. This is something that I'm seeing for a lot in these past years, and like people don't know how to organize their time, don't know how to inspire their brain to work. Also, like this is also important thing. Like somebody is like needs to run and listen to a few podcasts so they can get into the certain topics and talk about it. Not like all of us are just like we can talk out of the sudden of the things. Some of the people need to feed their brain to think about certain things, or maybe do some things outside of the work to spark their creative juices. That's also some things that we don't talk enough about.
And that's an ongoing process though. So for example, among the many weird things I do, one of them is that I'm an obsessive reader. So this year I'm letting myself down because I think I'm going to finish the year having read about 70 books, whereas normally it's closer to 100, right? But again, don't watch TV, don't spend much time on social media. That's how I read so much. And that gives me ideas. So I have lots and lots of notes on my phone about ideas for speeches, ideas of how to change or build up my keynote and stories I can tell. So when you have something that you have to do, you're not starting from scratch. You're not going, okay, what could I possibly talk about this stuff, or what do we need to? No, I mean, you are doing the research, you are doing the preparing through your time. If all your leisure is stuff that doesn't feed your creativity, and your creativity is something you need for work, then you need to tweak your leisure. I mean, there's plenty of excellent books and TV shows and documentaries and movies that will feed your creativity. You just need to change slightly the stuff you are consuming so that it's adding to what you need and not taking time and sometimes energy away from it.
Yeah, I see one of the things that I changed. Like I was reading 2 or 3 big books every 2 weeks, but now I started reading more comics because like I don't have the concentration to read like the food book, and I found like a lot of business books are all the same. There are like 1 or 2 things that you can take out of it, and that's like, okay, if I find faster those 1 or 2 things in the book, like I feel like, okay, I don't need to read the whole book. This is kind of the change of the mindset that I had. But also like comics, they show me like how to write effectively, copy, how to set up the scene, how to enter the new characters in the story, like all those kind of things. And I didn't think about it before. Like now when I'm reading, I'm like studying comics, and I'm like, okay, there are specific things that I can use over there, specific things that are teaching me something. And not, I mean, only the comics, but the story behind them. How did they develop the characters? How everything went on, and like I found like a new hobby, and it's interesting. I'm talking to people like there are people who are doing like physical work. They have the money to actually buy comics, and there are also people that have like, I don't know, not average but little above average salaries that can afford to buy comics. And like those are 2 groups of people that are reading the comics, and all of them are doing it from different reasons and with different backgrounds. And it's kind of, another story which is interesting, and I don't know, things that I'm just seeing.
Well, technology has made a lot of this stuff easier and more affordable. So, for example, with comics, which can be very expensive, and it's very easy to get. I want to get a whole season, a whole series of something. I mean, every comic will cost you like $5-10, and then you're spending a few hundred to get the whole season, the whole series of something. But now I think there's a app or a website called Comics with an X, and then it's a subscription, and you just pay and you can read as many comics as you want. My brother just told me the other day that in the lockdown he started reading the Walking Dead comics, and he read now all of them, and I think it's something like 170 sort of thick ones. And if we, even with the books, like, it's not how I read. I like reading the whole book, but there's an app that a lot of people like nowadays. I think it's called Blinkist, and they're just giving you the takeaways of a lot of books. So if someone wants to learn, some people will learn better with podcasts. Some people just want the takeaways. Some people, there is no shortage of ways to feed your brain if you decide you want to do that. You just find the one that works for you. There's nothing, all of them have their advantages and their disadvantages. Just find what works for you and do that, and not just do stuff to keep your brain occupied without necessarily learning anything. Entertainment's great, but there's no reason why the entertainment couldn't have a tiny bit that helps do all the other stuff.
Agree. We are close to the end, and there is one thing that I'm asking all my guests is there a topic or a sentence or something that we didn't talk about and you want to get into it, or a message that you want to tell to the audience? Is there anything that you would like to say, like, for the end?
So I should probably talk about stories, but I won't. And what I wanted to talk about is something we've been talking about to some extent just now, which is, so in the interview I described this as mental health, but that's kind of misleading because people tend to think of mental health as, things like depression and anxiety. But I have, from the past few years, have realized and become sort of surprised about how little attention we pay to the health of our brain. Because both of us wear glasses. It's very difficult to see anything if your glasses are dirty or if they're cracked. But our brain is like the glasses of our whole experience of life. If your brain is foggy because you're always anxious or angry or upset, then you're not going to experience life in the way you could. And some people have problems that need medical attention, and that's not necessarily what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is how very few people worry about doing something that makes their brains work better. So to some people, it's just more of the right stimulation. So the stuff we were talking about. But to a lot of people, are practices like meditation, right? Or some type of practice that helps you become a little less distracted, a little less stressed out. And every single person you speak to that says, yes, I have been meditating for a few months, a few years, you're not going to get a single one of them saying, yeah, it's not done anything for me. They all say, yeah, it's been very helpful. I'm calmer now. I'm less stressed out. I'm less anxious about stuff. But I don't know you, but almost no one I know personally does it. So if I think of the people, like all my friends, or the 12, 14 people that I spend most of my time with here in Barcelona, maybe one or two of them tried and didn't stick with it. If I broaden that out a little to a lot of the people that I know in Barcelona, there might be maybe 10 people, 15 people out of maybe 100, 150 that have some sort of practice, but it's a tiny percentage of most of the people I know. And to me, that's just crazy, because we worry about looking good and feeling good and looking healthy and losing weight and a lot of the stuff that often has very little impact in our quality of life and in our actual health. But very few people worry about keeping their brain in the right shape. And if you don't do that, all this other stuff is either not as good as it could be, or actually useless. Like you can be so massively successful professionally. You can have the marriage and the children, the big car, the big house, if those are the things you want, and none of that matters if your brain is not working properly, because you'll still be miserable, you'll still be anxious, you'll still be stressed out, and you can have very little. Or you can live in Serbia and bombs are falling on your head, and you're still enjoying life because your brain is making it easy for you to do that. And sometimes people are born that way, but you can definitely train yourself to be more that way. So that's something, it gets talked about, but now the conversation is more about the more extreme types of mental health, and not the everyday making your brain work a little bit better mental health that I think is the one that to 95% of the population is what they really need and are not doing at all.
You reminded me of a period in 2015. Like I was doing something totally else, living out of the activism, and like in the middle of writing projects, in the middle of the deadlines, like my father got sick. He actually died out of cancer 3 months after that. Like at the same time, my mother was in the hospital. She couldn't walk, and my sister was pregnant. So it was all up to me. And I just dropped out everything that I work at to take care of that. And I needed to get myself in the mindset and to get my brain so I can like be focused on that. And I remember it was hard. Like I was alone in the apartment thinking about all different things, like talking with my mother on my phone. My father was in a hospital, but in a different city. So just going with the ambulance from one city to the other. And like, when we talk about the mind, where was my mind at the moment? Like it would just blow out if I didn't take time to like just calm down, just think about the things from my perspective and not think about anything else. Just get my brain into the position that I can like be the person that can do the responsible things at the moment. And I think it's kind of the times when I actually like grew up in a way. It wasn't when I was like 30, it was when I was like 33. So it happened in a different period of time, but just some line of events caused me to kind of change the mindset, change the way I feel about life, the way I feel about health and everything else. Like, and I did a lot of things after that. Like I started even the Beardman Club in my hometown. That a group of people, we all held beards, and we were loud about men's health, about things that nobody's talking about, and it's kind of gave me another perspective of life. And I'm still doing it. Like now I'm when I'm in Novi Sad, I have like the Danube River, so I take maybe not every day, but like an hour every 3 days to just go and look at the river, and kind of like this is meditation for me. When I let my brain just go, my thoughts with the river, and it kind of clears up and it goes everything away, and I'm coming back like ready for what's next.
Yeah, to some extent you were lucky, because when you felt you needed to do something, otherwise you're going to suffer from it, you were still able to do it. But what happens with a lot of people is the same thing that happens with our bodies. So one thing that happens with older people a lot is they fall and they say break a hip, and that's always is the beginning of the end for a lot of older people. And the reason that happened is because they hadn't been taking care of themselves. Because why is it that us in our 30s we don't fall and break our hips? Because one, our bones are not that fragile, because our bones are supporting more muscle mass, and our muscles are not that weak because we do more physical activity. So the moment you sleep on the stairs, you go, ooh, and you straighten yourself out, and you think, oh, that would have been bad if I fallen, but you don't fall. And if you fall, you don't break. But I think what happens with a lot of people is they never did any work mentally or spiritually, as some people like to think of. And then when it happens, they fall and they break. So I think that the time to do these things is when you don't need them. You get yourself in the best shape you can, so when it happens, you can take it. Because life will get harder for all of us at some point. At some point, we or someone we love is going to get sick and is going to die, and businesses are not going to work, and maybe another pandemic will come or something. And if you're fighting those with a very weak foundation, then it's just very difficult. And that's why I think that it's not some people think it's a selfish thing. It's the least selfish thing you can ever do, is to look after yourself, because when the people you care about need you, you'll be ready to help them. When they are falling to pieces, you'll be there ready to pick them up. If you don't look after yourself, then you won't, and you become a problem and not part of the solution. And I think now, with the year we had, I know a lot of people that are really struggling this year, but their circumstances are no harder than mine. They have a job, they're making money, they're still healthy, and they're really struggling because they're struggling to cope with being in their house all the time, not seeing people all the time. So the only difference between them and me is our brains. The way we see the world is different, and some of that is lucky for me, and some of that is just a lot of effort being put over the years to try and be a bit more resilient that way. But just see how many people are going to come out of this going, yeah, it was a pain in the ass, I wish I had seen more people, but hey, we got through it. And so many people are going to have consequences, mental consequences from what's happened now for a very long time. And I think it's obvious that this is important. So it's something we need to make time for.
Important things, and I'm glad that we talked about it. Man, thank you for the conversation. I think it was a good one, totally honest, and we tackled some things that we usually don't talk about here, and I'm glad that we did. So thank you once again for doing it, and tell the people where they can find you.
Sure. So if you want to hear more story stuff, I have a podcast called the Story Powers Podcast. You can find it everywhere, and it's usually a conversation with someone else who works with story, like speakers, storytellers, marketing people, branding people, and we just have sort of very open, and they bring the knowledge, I bring the nonsense normally. But yeah, fun conversations, and that's what I'm putting a lot of my effort now. But you can find me on LinkedIn. And if you want to look me up, my website is storypowers.com. So those are the easiest ways to find me.
Thank you, man, once again for being here, and see you all online.